What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel, and it's time to give you my Week 11 college football playoff projections for the 2023 college football season. So we're going to give you my updated playoff projections here for Week 11 as we got 3 more weeks to go here in the regular season. I have made one change here to my playoff projections kind of compared to last week. There's going to be a brand new team here in these playoff projections for this week. And again, we're going to be basing it off of how the teams have been playing this year and also which teams have impressed me the most, and also basing it off of resumes and what could happen for the rest of the year. Which teams do I see getting in here to the playoff next year, or this year? So we're going to be basing it off of which teams will make it in here by the end of the year, and see, we're going to base it off of what the teams are going to do for the rest of the year as well. So let's get right into my Week 11 playoff projections, and we'll go to the bracket here. And here is the bracket once again for the college football playoff. And again, you look at the number 1 versus number 4 seeded matchup. That will take place in the Sugar Bowl. So that's where the number 1 versus number 4 seeded matchup will take place. And then the number 2 versus number 3 seed matchup will take place in the Rose Bowl. So that's where the semifinal games are at this year for the college football playoff. For the last time in the 4-team playoff bracket. We'll start with my number 1 seed here. And my number 1 seed is still going to be the Georgia Bulldogs. I do trust Georgia, to win out for the rest of the year and possibly win the SEC championship. They've been my number 1 seed ever since the beginning of this season. They were my preseason pick to win the national championship. I did change a few times, my national championship pick, these projections week by week. But I kind of am trusting a lot of, Georgia these days. I know they haven't had a really tough schedule, but you look at the schedule for them coming up. They got Ole Miss coming up on that Saturday, and then they got Tennessee coming up the next weekend. I think they win both of those games. They did defeat Missouri, and only by 9 points. It wasn't really the best performance that they've had this year. Of course, there's been times where Georgia's been inconsistent, and there's times where they've been consistent. And they've only done that for a couple of games this year against Kentucky and Florida. But I still think Georgia is one of the top teams in the country. I think they're going to win out and go to the SEC championship. But like I said, when I look at that SEC championship, I think that's going to be a really tough game now. I mean, Alabama's kind of rolling now. They're starting to win, a few more games. But I just don't think, Georgia, is going to struggle against Alabama. I know it's like an Alabama team that's been giving Georgia some struggles. But I think Georgia is much better than Alabama kind of compared to this year of how Alabama's been playing. But based off of that, I think Georgia's going to win out. They're still my pick to win the SEC championship, and they're still my pick to be the number 1 seed here in the playoff at the end of this season. My number 2 seed is still going to be the same team as well. It's going to be Michigan here. I also have them winning out and going to the Big Ten championship game, and I also have them beating Ohio State in the regular season. So Michigan stays my number 2 seed. I think this has been one of the most consistent teams all year long. Kind of similar to Georgia. They don't have a really tough schedule, but their real season begins coming up this weekend when they play Penn State on that Saturday. If they win that game, they're in a pretty good shape. But if they don't beat Ohio State, they're in bad shape, because if you look at that, they're not going to make it to the Big Ten championship. Unless if Ohio State slips up somewhere, but I don't think that's going to happen either. I think the Buckeyes are going to be undefeated going into that Michigan game. Plus, Michigan gets the game at home this year, and I just don't think Michigan's going to lose that game now, because obviously they got the home game, the home field advantage, and Ohio State's offense has not been very good this year. I think Michigan has a better offense than Ohio State, and also maybe not a better defense. I think Ohio State has a better defense than Michigan, because Ohio State's like top 5 in the country on defense, but still, I think Michigan, kind of similar to Georgia, I think they win out, go to the Big Ten championship, and then they get in there as a number 2 seed. It won't be enough to pass Georgia for the number 1 seed, but I still got the top 2 teams here. Georgia and Michigan have been my number 1 and my number 2 seeds since the beginning of the season. And also here at number 3, they've been my number 3 seed ever since beginning after week 1, and that is going to be Florida State. Florida State, I got them winning out, going to the ACC championship. I think they do beat Louisville by a really close game, but I think, Florida State's going to win out, go 13-0, and get in here as a number 3 seed, and it will be their first playoff appearance since the 2014 season when the first college football playoff, team playoff bracket came out. So I think Florida State, again, I think they're going to beat Louisville in the ACC Championship. You look at the schedule the rest of the way for them, not really any tough challenges for them. Obviously, the Miami game is a little bit concerning, but I think they're going to win that game this Saturday. I know, I'm just saying that they're going to win it here, but again, you never know what can happen. We're in the month of November. Upsets usually happen. But even if Florida State does lose that game against Miami, it's not going to just ruin their playoff hopes, but they're still going to get to the ACC championship game, even with one loss in there, and it will still be Louisville that they'll play. And again, I think that's the ACC championship matchup, and again, I'm picking Florida State to win that game. So again, these are my top three teams, Georgia, Michigan, and Florida State. Georgia, Michigan have been here ever since the season began, and then for Florida State, they've been here ever since after that LSU win. So that LSU win is kind of not looking good for Florida State now, because LSU, if they lose this weekend, that win's not going to look good for them now, and that might not be enough to put them in the playoff and everything. But let's go to my number 4 seed. I made a change here, like I said, to my number 4 seed. I put one new team in here, and that number 4 team for me is going to be Oregon. So I put Oregon in here this week. Looking at Oregon now in the past few weeks, ever since that loss to Washington in the Pac-12 conference, they just made a lot of mistakes in that game, but ever since that loss, I think they've been definitely the best Pac-12 team. I think they've been the most dominant team in the Pac-12 as well. And when I look at that Pac-12 championship game, it's looking like it's going to be Oregon and Washington, because both of those teams, you look at Oregon, they just have one loss in the Pac-12 to that Washington team, and Washington defeated, USC this past weekend. But I think Oregon's going to be out for revenge in that game. And with that being said, if Oregon wins out, goes to the Pac-12 championship, defeats Washington, they're automatically going to get in. They're going to pass Washington here, not just because of the regular season matchup, but just because of the revenge factor in that Pac-12 championship game. But like I said, I could change my pick here as we get into the later part of the season. But as of right now, Oregon is playing the best college football, I think, in the country. I think they're playing better, a lot better than, Ohio State, and also a lot better maybe than Alabama. I mean, Alabama's been getting better, but, they're just not scoring a bunch of points like Oregon is. Again, Oregon has been very dominant ever since that Washington loss. And I just could see this Oregon team getting in there as a number 4 seed. If they were to win the Pac-12 championship, and then they would go 12-1, and that would be enough for them to get in there as a one-loss playoff team. So watch out for the Oregon Ducks here in the last few weeks. They can definitely make a run, win the Pac-12 championship, and then be the only Pac-12 team that can get in here to the playoff, because Oregon and Washington are the only Pac-12 teams left standing for a playoff spot. I know Texas is in there as well at the Big 12, but I just don't think they're going to pass Oregon in the playoff rankings, because Oregon is ahead of them. So I think that's how the playoff committee is going to work. I think Texas, even if they win the Big 12 championship, and if Oregon wins the Pac-12 championship, they'll get in. But what if Oregon loses the Pac-12 championship? Well, that would get Washington in there, because Washington is ahead of Texas as well. But I just don't know how the playoff committee is going to work, because we have so many contenders, in the playoff this year. I mean, more than like 5 and more than like 6. I think we got like 10 playoff contenders this year, and you can just see how tough it is for the committee. It is going to be for the committee, for the rest of the year here as we head into these final 3 weeks. But again, these are my top 4 teams here for Week 11 of these projections. It's Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, and Oregon. Let's now make some predictions here if these games were to happen. So first off, we got the Sugar Bowl, Georgia versus Oregon. This is a rematch from the last year, the season opener. Georgia obviously blowing out Oregon in that game. I think Oregon is a much better team than they were from last year in that Georgia game. Remember, they got on that big winning streak, and then they started to lose again. But I think Oregon is a much better team kind of compared to last year. But still, I think Georgia is one of the top teams in the country, and also Kirby Smart, I think that will have this defense ready against this high-powered Oregon offense. So I'm still going to pick Georgia here regardless. I know Oregon's been a really good team these past few weeks, but I'm still going to pick Georgia here as my preseason pick. And then Michigan versus Florida State. Like I said, this matchup would be a shootout here, but I still, trust Michigan a little bit more than Florida State. So with that being said, I'm going to choose Michigan here once again to defeat Florida State here in the semifinal of the Rose Bowl. And I'm still picking with my national championship pick. Georgia versus Michigan here in the national championship. Like I said, I think this would be a really good game between these two teams. But again, I do trust Georgia's defense a little bit more than Michigan's defense. I think Georgia, obviously they haven't been really consistent like, Michigan has. But I'm still picking with my preseason pick. And, when Georgia kind of gets into these long waits, in the, games and everything, like they like say they have to wait like 4 weeks. They are really well prepared, and they just play really good. So with that being said, I'm still going to pick my preseason pick here, and that is going to be the Georgia Bulldogs. So I got Georgia winning it here in Week 11 if these games were to happen, let's say tomorrow. But again, I've made my change here to my number 4 seed. I think Oregon is probably going to win out, go to the Pac-12 championship, and as of right now, they're my pick to win the Pac-12 championship just based off of what they've been doing. I think they've been so much better than Washington as well in the Pac-12. And again, I think Oregon's been one of the most dominant teams in the Pac-12, even though Washington is undefeated. But these are my playoff projections here for Week 11 of the 2023 college football season. We'll see what happens here in these last 3 weeks. Stay tuned for my video tomorrow. I'll give you my New Year's Six bowl projections tomorrow. Stay tuned for that video. But thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports channel.